First virgin in my life. It's actually very strange to write about your experience and not very pleasant when people get into your life. How I lost my virginity myself I don't remember very well, but my first boy. This happened very recently, and I am still in a sense under the impression of what I did. Well, that was the preface, which you, the reader, probably got tired of. I met him, his name is Kostya, as it would not seem stupid and funny in the chat. We corresponded for about 6 months and told each other everything. The problem is that I live in a city that doesn't have a name for obvious reasons, and he lives in the suburbs. And then one day he told me that he was going to the city and we would meet. I asked him to pager me as soon as he arrived, and that's exactly what happened. But he couldn't call me. I waited for his call a day, waited for another, and on the third day I spat on everything. And she invited her punk friends to visit. There were 2 of them. They, like Easton punks, with empty hands and visit with empty hands do not go, and so I brought 2 Butelki, flagmen. We drank, then began to play the guitar, sing songs by Yegor Letov, The King and the Fool, Naive, Cockroaches, and so on. 2 hours passed, and it turned out that one of the punks had to leave, and the other was in no hurry. As soon as one of them went out the door and I closed the door behind him, my besotted friend grabbed me and began to kiss me passionately. By the time I was confused and didn't know whether to push him away or to surrender. Either it's alcohol or passion, but I didn't resist. He picked me up and carried me into the room. I wrapped my legs around his waist and continued to kiss him. He pressed my back against the wall, freeing his hands for further action. He tore his mouth from mine and began to move down to my chest. His hands took off my t-shirt and in front of him were my bare breasts, TK life hack I do not like to wear. He started kissing them like this. That I thought he was going to eat me. I slid down a little, and felt that his boy was ready to take me. Then I began to take off his t-shirt, which was Beavis and Bad Hat. I began to kiss his collarbone, chest and below, to the navel, which, by the way, as a punk should be, was a pile of silver. Meanwhile, he took me by the buttocks and lifted me a little, and I hugged him tighter with my legs. Still kissing his neck, I managed to unbutton his fly, and he released me, and I landed on the floor. I continued to take off his pants, but he didn't resist. I took off my pants, which are hardly pants, just pins and chains, and stood up to my full height. I put my arm around his waist and started kissing his lips. Plucking up the courage, I put my hands in his pants, and began to stroke his ass. Meanwhile, he was already kissing my shoulders and taking off my jeans and placky. As soon as I was undressed, I took off his underwear. His cock was high and hungry for my flesh. I ran my finger over it, pushing it a little on my head, and Ponk grabbed my buttocks again and lifted me into his arms, pinning me against the wall. He continued to suck me, and his cock went all the way into me. I cried out in surprise. He began to rotate his pelvis, driving his 20 cm penis into me up to the balls. It seemed to me that I was fucked not by a member, but by a fanar pole, but the pain was replaced by a pleasant feeling. My legs tightened around him as he accelerated. Sensing the approach of orgasm, he fucked me with cosmic speed, and the last time he entered me, he came, and I with him. At that moment, I didn't care that he came in me, and that at 14 I could get pregnant. The worst thing is that at this moment the phone rang. I quickly ran to it, and gave signs of life in a haggard voice, heard the familiar voice of my bones. We made an appointment with him, and an hour later I was there. There were a lot of people around, and I didn't know which one of them was Kostya. I walked on, but then I was hailed. 300 meters away stood a guy and smiled at me. I went to meet him and he just ran to me with his arms outstretched. I was drowned in his arms and kisses. But I felt so bad that 2 hours ago I was hugged by a punk, and now this boy will admire me, and praise me in front of friends. I began to cry, and my hot tear touched his cheek. He lifted my head from my shoulder and looked me in the eye and asked what was wrong. I couldn't say anything, I just looked down and started crying even harder. He understood everything, and hugged me tighter than before, then began to kiss my eyes, lips, cheeks. Passers-by looked at us with mad eyes, but I didn't care. I began to understand that I didn't need a cool, experienced punk, but this boy who, at 16, knew 5 ventilation systems and a pregnant woman. We went with him to the building where his friends were and the girl who was running after him. Looking at her, I realized what a bitch I was. I cheated on him with a friend, although he could also have long ago slept with this blonde, but did not do it. Then we went to the hall, where there was nothing interesting, and so we went for a walk in the evening city. It was snowing, the lights were shining, and we were walking along the sidewalk holding hands and talking about who knows what. Passing by the music store, we heard Frozen Fingers, In the Absence of Hot Water, Inhibited Thoughts, In the Absence of Course You. Looking at my hands, I saw not hands but icicles, and later realized that when he is not around, I cannot not think about what Som is. Ramazanova was right. It's time to go home. We kissed for a long time, oddly enough, near the wedding palace. And then I got on the minibus and went home. My mind was completely engrossed in what had happened, and my lips still felt the bite of his. After 6 days, he came to me again, and that's when the boy's aversion to Mashina happened. But think about it, he didn't know the city very well, so I had to meet him. I stood at the appointed spot and looked for the familiar green eyes. When I saw Carla, I just stood there looking at him and smiling stupidly. He came to me and hugged me. For lack of time, we immediately went to the bus stop because my friend had a birthday that day and I had to congratulate her. We drove for a long time, about an hour. When I came to her, I congratulated her, gave her a gift, and we left. We went to Koo for me, but the house was Cesira. After sitting at home for half an hour, we went to a cafe where my friends were sitting and drinking beer. We joined them, I was the only girl in their male company. Kostya quickly got used to it and started talking about computers, telling jokes. The beer made me want to go to the bathroom. Coming out of the toilet, I saw Kostya, who pushed me back and locked the door. I didn't know what he was doing, but I didn't stop him. He said that he had waited too long for this moment, and began to kiss my neck. For lack of time, I told him to get on with the copulation itself. He unbuttoned my jeans and pulled them down with my underpants. I stood in front of him and he watched. He stared at me with his eyes wide and didn't do anything. What can I say, he's a virgin. And so I had to go to action myself. I took off his pants and underpants. But to his horror, it turned out that he did not stand. Then I took his hand and began to masturbate. He was an obedient boy and quickly responded to my caresses. Then I jumped on his arm and helped to get myself on his cock. Even though he was a virgin, he was good at it, even though I didn't come. But he came violently and long. That was such a day. I hope you were interested in listening to my story. Thanks for your attention. Dear listener, I am pleased that you looked at our channel. I'm sure you liked this story. Tell it to your friends. If you liked the story, the best way to thank you is to click on the like button and subscribe. This helps you develop our channel. Thank you very much. I recommend other stories and parables, you will definitely like them, that are somewhat similar to this one. With respect, the Expert Plus. you.